The air between us had shifted in the days since we made our pact. There was an intimacy now, a closeness that neither of us had dared to explore before. It was as if we were standing at the edge of something monumental, something neither of us fully understood but both felt in our bones. We had come so far, too far perhaps, and yet there was still this unspoken truth lingering between us. The truth I was terrified to speak. Every time I looked at David, I felt it, the weight of everything I knew, the knowledge of the future, the knowledge of the pain we both still had to endure. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to confess everything, to explain why I was acting this way, why I was so desperate to protect him, why I couldn't let him go, even though we had been strangers bound by a contract for years. But each time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat, trapped by fear. What if telling him would change everything? What if the future I was trying so desperately to avoid ended up being the one we had to live after all? I had already seen how fragile time could be, how easily everything could slip through our fingers if we weren't careful. One wrong move, one confession, and I could destroy everything. I could destroy him. David had been nothing but kind to me lately, more open than I had ever seen him. We were making progress. We were finally becoming a real couple, and I didn't want to risk it. I couldn't risk it. But the truth was eating at me, clawing at my insides, demanding to be set free. I spent nights tossing and turning, haunted by the what-ifs, wondering if I could keep the secret any longer. The future was too delicate to mess with. Yet here I was, standing at the edge of it, knowing that every word I said could send us spiraling into something far worse. Tonight was no different. David had come home from work early, and we were sitting together on the couch, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the fireplace. The silence between us was comfortable, yet it felt like there was something more unsaid in the space between us. I could feel it, the tension building up inside me, threatening to burst. "You've been quiet tonight," David said, his voice soft but observant. He turned to look at me, his steel blue eyes searching my face as if trying to read me like an open book. I swallowed hard. "Just thinking," I murmured, my fingers playing nervously with the hem of my sleeve. He raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a small, knowing smile. About what? The question was simple enough, but the weight of it felt heavy, like he was asking me to open up to him in a way I wasn't ready for. I had promised myself that I would be honest with him from here on out, but there were still parts of me that were terrified of what the truth might do. "About us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. David's expression softened, and he leaned a little closer to me. "What about us?" he asked quietly, his hand brushing against mine. I looked down at our intertwined fingers, my heart pounding in my chest. How could I explain the storm of emotions swirling inside me? How could I put into words the fear and the love and the overwhelming guilt that had been tearing me apart? I stopped myself, my breath catching in my throat, my lips parted, and for a fleeting moment I almost said it. I almost told him everything, about the future, about how I had seen his death, how I was trying to change the course of time. But then I froze. The fear gripped me again, cold and sharp. What if telling him would make things worse? What if, by revealing the truth, I was sealing his fate? I couldn't bear to lose him, not when we were finally beginning to find something real between us. "I'm just scared," I whispered instead, my voice trembling. David's eyes softened, and he reached up to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle. "Scared of what?" he asked, his voice full of concern. I closed my eyes, my chest tightening as the words teetered on the edge of my lips, but I held them back. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Not like this. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared of everything changing, scared of losing what we've built, of losing you." David's hand squeezed mine gently, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. "You're not going to lose me, Lily. I'm not going anywhere." I opened my eyes to meet his gaze, and for a moment, everything else faded away. It was just him and me, standing on the edge of something new, something fragile. But I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. Not yet. "I don't want to lose you either," I murmured, my voice barely audible. David leaned in closer, his lips brushing against my forehead in a soft, comforting kiss. "You won't," he whispered. And for a moment, I believed him, but deep down, I knew I was lying to him. And more importantly, I knew I was lying to myself. It started innocently enough. David had been working late as usual, and I had spent the evening catching up on some reading, trying to distract myself from the growing sense of unease that had settled in my chest. Something felt off, though I couldn't quite place it. The peaceful rhythm we had established in the past few days was suddenly disrupted, like a stone thrown into calm water, sending ripples of anxiety across the surface. When David finally returned home, his expression was tight, his jaw clenched. I watched him as he set his briefcase down with a quiet thud and hung his coat up, the silence between us thick with an unspoken tension. It wasn't like him to come back from a long day of work so visibly agitated. Rough day? I asked carefully, not wanting to push him but needing to understand what had caused this sudden change in him. David only nodded, walking past me without answering, his pace brisk and purposeful. He was distant, and I couldn't tell if it was just the weight of his day or something more. Just as I was about to ask again, there was a knock at the door. I glanced toward David, who froze in place, his expression darkening. "I'll get it," I said quickly, hoping to break the uncomfortable silence. But as I opened the door, I was met with a woman I didn't recognize. She was tall, with sharp features and dark, striking eyes that seemed to pierce straight through me. Her hair was dark, cascading in waves around her shoulders, and she wore a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something about her that immediately put me on edge. "Hi, I'm Elena," she said, her voice smooth but with an undercurrent of something that felt off. I was hoping to speak with David. Her gaze flicked over my shoulder, landing on David as he appeared at the door, his posture stiff and rigid. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, followed quickly by something I couldn't read. "Elena," he said, his voice curt, though there was no mistaking the history in the way he said her name. I stepped back, feeling suddenly out of place in my own home. "I'll let you two talk," I said quietly, but Elena's gaze shifted back to me, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in my presence. "You must be Lily," she said, her voice sweet but with an edge that sent a chill down my spine. "David's wife." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. Elena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I've heard a lot about you," she continued, her tone deceptively pleasant. "I just wanted to make sure everything is okay. I haven't seen David in a while, and well, I just wanted to check in." David's expression darkened, and I noticed the way his shoulders tensed. His hands subtly moved to his pocket, his fingers fidgeting with something that I couldn't see. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Whatever this was, it wasn't a simple friendly visit. "Elena, I don't think now is the right time," David said, his voice colder now, the warmth from earlier completely gone. But Elena wasn't ready to leave just yet. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving mine. "Isn't it? I just thought it would be nice to catch up to see how things are going. After all, it's been a long time, hasn't it?" Her gaze lingered on David for a moment, then slid back to me. "I'm sure you understand how things can get complicated between old friends." The way she emphasized the word complicated made my stomach twist. There was something unspoken in the air between the three of us, a tension that only seemed to grow stronger with every word she spoke. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I think it's better if we talk some other time, Elena. David's had a long day." But Elena wasn't deterred. She stepped into the foyer, her presence unmistakable as she made her way toward David. Her eyes never left me, and I could feel the challenge in the way she moved. "I'll just have a quick word with David, and then I'll be on my way," she said, her tone polite but carrying an unmistakable sense of ownership. "It won't take long." I felt a knot form in my stomach, something in her words, something in her gaze that made my skin crawl. It was as if she was testing me, seeing if I would back down, if I would let her claim her place beside David without a fight. David's hand brushed mine briefly, and his voice, though quiet, was firm. "Elena, I don't think..." But she wasn't listening. Instead, her gaze fixed on me, her smile widening slightly, but it was no longer friendly. It was cold, calculating. "You know, David was always the one who would never settle for anything less than perfect," she said, her voice almost sing-song. "I just want to make sure he's really made the right choice." I felt the walls around my chest tighten. The accusation, the implication hung heavily in the air between us. She was testing me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I think David is more than capable of making his own decisions, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Elena raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smile that felt like a warning. Of course he is. I just hope you're not taking advantage of him, Lily. The words stung, sharp and deliberate. My stomach churned with the sting of jealousy and possessiveness in her tone, but I couldn't let her see the effect it had on me. Not yet. Before I could respond, David stepped in, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. Elena, enough. She hesitated for just a second before her smile faltered. She didn't say another word, but the challenge in her eyes remained. She turned on her heel and walked out, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. As the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My mind was spinning, a whirlwind of emotions colliding inside me. I had known David had a past, but this woman, this Elena, was something entirely different. There was something more here, something she wasn't saying, and I could feel the tension building between us. David remained silent, his face unreadable, his jaw still tight. I wanted to ask him what that had been about, to demand to know the history between them, but I didn't. Instead, I simply took a step back, my hands trembling slightly. David, I started, but he held up a hand, silencing me. I'll explain later, he said, his voice low and strained. The world around me seemed to slow to a crawl as the car sped down the winding road. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, each beat a loud, frantic echo in my ears. David had been driving us home after another long evening. He was unusually quiet, his focus solely on the road, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. The radio played softly in the background, the only sound aside from the rush of air outside the car. Then it happened. A sudden screech of metal against metal echoed in the air as the car jolted forward. I barely had time to react before I felt the car lurch beneath us. Panic surged through me as I looked at David's face. His eyes were wide with shock, his fingers pressing harder against the brake pedal, but it wasn't enough. The brakes were failing, and there was nothing we could do. The car swerved dangerously, sliding across the slick road. I screamed, gripping the seat in front of me as the world around us spun uncontrollably. "David!" I yelled, panic creeping into my voice. He didn't answer, his eyes locked on the road ahead as he tried to steer the car into a safer direction. But the control was slipping, and I could feel the fear crawling up my throat. The sound of the tires screeching against the road was deafening, and the impending crash seemed inevitable. Time seemed to stretch, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, mostly fear, mostly the thought that I might never see another day. The thought of never telling David how I truly felt, of never having a chance at all, made my chest tighten painfully. Then, with a jolt, the car came to a halt. I sat there for a moment, dazed, not quite sure if I was still breathing. The world outside was silent, the screeching of the tires replaced by the hum of the car engine idling. David's breathing was ragged. Slowly, he turned to me, his face pale and his eyes wide with shock, though his grip on the wheel was still firm. His knuckles were white, his jaw clenched, as if trying to steady himself. But he was shaken too. We sat there for a few moments in silence, the only sound our harsh breathing, until David finally spoke. "Are you okay?" His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, as he looked at me with an intensity I had never seen before. I nodded, my throat tight. "I think so." But even as the words left my mouth, my hands began to shake uncontrollably, the fear still coursing through my veins like a wild current. It was only then that I realized how close I had come to losing everything. I felt small, vulnerable, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Before I could say anything else, I felt the weight of David's presence beside me. He turned towards me, his hand reaching out to gently touch my arm. The warmth of his touch was grounding, like a lifeline in the storm of emotions that had engulfed me. "Lily?" His voice was soft, and there was something raw in it that made my chest tighten all over again. He was struggling too, I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't unaffected by this. I turned to face him, and that's when I saw it. The vulnerability in his eyes, the rawness in the way he was looking at me. It was the first time I had seen David this open, this exposed, and something inside me shifted, and before I could stop it, before I could think through the consequences, I felt my emotions spill over. I broke. I reached, my hands trembling as I touched his arm. I was so scared, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. I thought we were going to, but the rest of my sentence died in my throat as David closed the distance between us. His hand cupped the side of my face, gently but with a determination that made my heart race even faster. His thumb stroked over my cheek, his touch tender yet full of an unspoken promise. His eyes were so intense, so full of emotion, and before I could comprehend what was happening, his lips were on mine. It was soft at first, hesitant as if he was testing the waters, unsure of how I would react. But then something shifted, something deep inside me that made me respond. My hand moved to his chest, the heat of his body grounding me as the kiss deepened, more urgent now, more desperate. The world around us seemed to fall away. There was no road, no car, no danger. It was just us in this moment, our hearts beating in time, our breaths mingling together. When he finally pulled away, his forehead pressed against mine, our breaths ragged. He didn't say anything at first, just held me there, his hands on my shoulders, his thumb lightly brushing over my skin. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said, his voice low and filled with such raw sincerity that it made my chest tighten all over again. I stared up at him, my heart in my throat. I had no idea how to respond, how to process what had just happened. My mind was still reeling from the near miss and the intensity of the kiss. But in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. This was real. Whatever we had, it wasn't just a contract anymore. It wasn't just an arrangement. It was something deeper, something that scared me in ways I couldn't even explain. And yet as David's gaze met mine, I knew I wasn't ready to let go of it, of him. Not now, not ever. The days following the accident passed in a haze, the memory of David's kiss still lingering on my lips and the terror of the near miss gnawing at the back of my mind. It had all happened so quickly, too quickly, and yet it felt like a warning, a sign that something was wrong, something far worse than I could see. David seemed to have shaken off the fear, his usual stoic demeanor returning, but I knew him too well now. He wasn't as unshaken as he pretended to be. And I could feel it. The tension, the unspoken weight he was carrying, something dark that lurked beneath his carefully crafted exterior. It wasn't just the near accident that had unsettled me. It was the nagging thought that kept gnawing at my thoughts. The brakes had failed too perfectly, too conveniently, and I couldn't ignore the possibility that it hadn't been an accident at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, someone who wanted David gone. I had 10 days, just 10 days left in the contract before it was over, before I was free to walk away, to let go of everything and everyone that had entangled me in this web. But I couldn't, no, I wouldn't let David go without finding out the truth. I couldn't stand by and let him be targeted, let him get hurt, not after everything we had shared. The idea of it sent a cold shiver down my spine, and I knew it was time to act. I spent hours alone in the library, my laptop open in front of me, searching for any clue, any sign of who might be behind this. I scoured through David's company's recent business dealings, trying to track any potential enemies, any signs of hostility, but nothing stood out. Nothing gave me the evidence I needed. Frustration built inside me, a knot tightening in my chest. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I had to find the answers, and fast. David had been too close to death. The thought of losing him, of him never knowing how much I truly cared, it was too much to bear. I needed help. That night, I took a different approach. I called Lucas, David's trusted assistant. He knew everything about the inner workings of the company, the people who surrounded David, the whispers in the shadows. He might have something that I couldn't see on my own. "Lucas," I said when he answered, my voice tight. "I need you to tell me everything you know about David's business dealings, his enemies, anything unusual." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, finally, Lucas spoke. "Lily, are you sure about this? You know how dangerous it can be. I don't want to get you involved in something you don't understand." "I don't care," I snapped, the urgency clear in my voice. "Please, Lucas, I need to know." He sighed, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice as he began to talk. "There's been a lot of tension in the company lately. Some of the deals David's been working on have made certain people uncomfortable, the kind of people who aren't afraid to use underhanded methods to get what they want." I listened intently, my mind racing as he continued, naming names of investors and competitors who had been known for shady dealings in the past, but nothing concrete, nothing that screamed danger. Still, it wasn't enough. Not yet. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was the image of the car careening off the road, the terrifying screech of the tires, and David's face, his panic, his fear. But I couldn't show it. I couldn't let David see how much I was falling apart. Not now. Not when he needed me to be strong. I began following him more closely, keeping track of his meetings and appointments, looking for any sign of a pattern. I started asking questions where I knew I could, poking into corners where I could find answers without raising suspicion. Every conversation, every detail seemed to point back to one person. A shadowy figure who had been involved in some of the recent business disputes David's company had been facing. A person I had never heard of before until now. His name was Nathaniel Westbrook. A distant relative of one of David's biggest competitors, with a reputation for ruthlessness and a history of stepping over anyone who got in his way. I hadn't heard David mention his name, but Lucas had, and something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I knew I had to find more. I had to confront David with the truth. No more secrets. But it wasn't the right time. Not yet. He was already so deeply entangled in this world of power and danger. If I told him everything, would he listen? Or would he push me away thinking I was just being paranoid? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was running out of time. 10 days. That's all I had left before the contract ended, before everything went back to normal. But how could I just walk away when I knew David was in danger? I finally reached a breaking point when David caught me one night, staring at my phone, trying to dig deeper into Nathaniel Westbrook's background. His voice was calm, but the tension in his gaze said everything. "What are you doing, Lily?" he asked softly, his eyes scanning the screen in my hands. "I'm trying to find out who's after you," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. David's expression shifted. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "I don't want you involved in this," he said, stepping forward. "This is my fight, not yours." I looked up at him, my resolve hardening. "I'm not letting you fight alone." His gaze softened for just a moment before he sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "You're stubborn, you know that?" "I'm serious, David," I said, the words coming out with more force than I had intended. "I won't let you get hurt. I won't let you fight this alone." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "I know." And for the first time, there was a crack in his armor. The mask of the untouchable businessman started to slip, and I saw the man beneath, the man who was afraid, just like me. The next 10 days felt like an eternity. I didn't know if I'd find the truth in time or if I'd be too late to stop whatever was coming for David. But one thing was certain. I couldn't just walk away. The weight of the past few days pressed heavily on my chest, suffocating me with every breath I took. I had spent countless hours digging through every corner of David's business dealings, trying to find the missing link that would lead me to the person behind the plot against him. But I was running out of time, and still I had nothing concrete to go on. David had been more distant lately, withdrawing into himself as if carrying the world on his shoulders. But tonight, something changed. Something in the air felt different, tense, charged with anticipation. I found him in his office, his face lit by the cold glow of his computer screen, the only light in the otherwise dim room. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, but he wasn't typing. He was staring at the screen, lost in thought, as if searching for answers that had been eluding him for too long. I stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment before stepping forward. "David?" I said softly, my voice low but steady. "I need to know the truth. Please." He didn't look up at first. Then slowly he exhaled, a deep, heavy sigh that spoke volumes of the exhaustion he was carrying. "I've suspected it for a long time, Lily," he said quietly, his voice rough. "I've known for a while that someone in my company wanted me dead." My heart stuttered in my chest at his words. I had suspected something like this, but hearing him say it aloud made it all the more real. This wasn't just some paranoid delusion, it was true. David was being targeted. "Who?" I whispered, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "Who's doing this?" David finally turned to face me, his eyes dark with wariness and a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "I don't know," he confessed, his voice heavy with frustration. "But I'm not stupid, Lily. There are too many people who want my position, too many people who have everything to gain if I'm out of the picture." I stepped closer, my mind racing. The thought of someone plotting to take his life, someone close enough to him to have access to everything, made my blood run cold. But we couldn't afford to dwell on that fear. We needed answers. "We'll figure this out," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We'll work together. We can uncover the truth together." David stared at me for a long moment, the silence between us thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, he nodded slowly, as if coming to some quiet resolution. "All right," he said, his voice resolute. "Let's do this." The next few days were a whirlwind of secrets and lies. David and I began piecing together fragments of information, digging into the company's financial records, talking to people who had once worked with him, and tracing every business deal he had made in the last year. The deeper we dug, the more questions arose. People in David's inner circle were acting strangely, too distant, too quiet. Some had already moved on to other ventures, while others had simply vanished. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that someone was aware of our investigation, and that they were doing everything in their power to cover their tracks. David seemed to be the target of a conspiracy so intricate and so carefully planned that I could hardly believe it. Whoever was behind this had resources, connections that reached far beyond the business world. They were dangerous, methodical, but as the days passed, something else started to change. David, once closed off, began opening up more to me. He confided in me about his fears, his regrets, the things that had haunted him for years. And I could see it now. The walls he had built around himself were crumbling, little by little. He was letting me in, piece by piece, despite the dark storm swirling around him. It was terrifying, seeing the cracks in the man I had once only seen from a distance. But it also felt like a breakthrough, like we were finally seeing each other, truly seeing each other for the first time. It was late one night when we uncovered the most crucial piece of the puzzle. We had been going through a set of old emails, looking for any sign of suspicious activity, when one name kept coming up: Nathaniel Westbrook. The name had been mentioned several times in connection with some shady financial dealings, but there was something else hidden in the threads of the conversations. A threat, a direct threat against David. It was clear now. Nathaniel wasn't just some rival businessman. He was the one pulling the strings, orchestrating the entire plot to destroy David's life, to push him out of the company, maybe even kill him. My heart sank as I read the words, the implications of them slowly sinking in. David wasn't just dealing with business enemies. He was facing a personal vendetta, a dangerous grudge that ran deeper than I had ever imagined. "We have to stop him," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything we had just uncovered. "We have to tell someone before it's too late." David didn't respond immediately. Instead, he sat there, his gaze fixed on the screen, his jaw clenched tightly as if holding back a storm of emotions. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled. "I'll handle it," he said, "but I need you to stay out of this. This is my fight, Lily. You're already too involved." But I wasn't going to back down now. Not after everything that had happened. Not after everything I had seen. "No," I said firmly, stepping forward. "We're in this together. We've been working together this whole time. I'm not walking away now." David's gaze softened, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability, fear, but also trust. A trust I hadn't realized he had placed in me. "You're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll do this together. We had one shot at this, one chance to uncover the truth before everything came crashing down. But even with the evidence in front of us, even with the answers within reach, I knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. Nathaniel Westbrook wasn't just some businessman. He was a predator. And predators didn't stop until they got what they wanted. The stakes had never been higher, and I wasn't going to let David face this alone. Not anymore. The weight of the secret had been suffocating, pressing down on me with every passing moment. I had promised myself that I would never reveal the truth, not unless it was absolutely necessary. But now, as I stood in front of David, everything had changed. The stakes had never been higher, and the lies were becoming harder to hold. His eyes locked onto mine, dark with concern but also confusion. He could sense that something was off, that something was wrong. He knew that I was hiding something, but he had no idea what it was. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment I had been dreading, the moment when everything I had tried to protect would unravel. "David," I started, my voice shaky. "There's something I need to tell you, something you won't believe." He raised an eyebrow, his face unreadable. "Lily, you're starting to scare me. What is it?" I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage I had left. I had to do this. I had no choice. "I'm not from this time," I said, my words coming out in a rush. "I'm from the future. I didn't belong here. I came back. I came back to stop the accident that was supposed to kill you." David blinked at me, his expression flickering between disbelief and confusion. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just stared at me, as if trying to process what I had said. I pressed on, unable to stop now. I died in the future, and when I woke up, I was here. Back in time. I was supposed to help you, to prevent everything from happening the way it did, but I didn't understand how. I didn't know if I could change anything. But then, everything started to happen the same way again. The accident, the threats, the danger. David took a step back, his hands instinctively gripping the edge of the desk behind him. "Are you saying you're from the future?" His voice was low, disbelieving, as if he couldn't quite wrap his mind around the words. I nodded, my chest tight with the weight of the truth. "I know it sounds insane, but it's the truth. I came back for you to fix everything, to stop you from dying, to stop the people who are trying to kill you." For a long, torturous moment, there was silence. David didn't move, didn't speak. His eyes were locked onto mine, searching, trying to find any sign that I was lying, that this was some kind of elaborate joke. But it wasn't, and I knew it. Finally, David spoke, his voice harsh, almost incredulous. This is too much? Lily, I know," I interrupted, stepping toward him. "I know it sounds crazy, but I wouldn't tell you this if I wasn't sure. I remember everything, the accident, everything that happened in the future. I know you don't believe me, but you have to believe that I'm trying to help you." David shook his head, clearly struggling to process the impossible truth I had just laid out in front of him. "How do I know you're not just—" He faltered, clearly trying to find the words. "This isn't some game. You can't just tell me you're from the future and expect me to believe it." "I don't expect you to believe it," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "But it's the truth. I've seen the future, David. I've seen what happens if we don't stop this, if we don't uncover the truth. You die, I die, and everything goes to hell." David's face paled, his lips pressing into a tight line. He didn't move, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but everything about this situation was impossible, irrational. How could someone come from the future? How could I possibly be telling the truth? "I don't know what you want me to say, Lily," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "This is insane, and it hurts. It hurts to think that everything I've known, everything I've trusted is suddenly fake." "I'm not fake, David," I said softly, stepping closer to him. "I'm real, and everything I've done, everything I've felt it for you. I'm here because I want to save you." He looked at me then, his gaze searching, desperate, as if trying to find some thread of truth in my words. And for a moment, I saw it. His guard was lowering. Just slightly. But I saw it. But before he could speak, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the words that were coming. "I didn't tell you sooner because I was afraid of changing things, afraid of messing it all up. But I can't keep this from you anymore. I need you to know." David looked away, his eyes flicking to the floor as if searching for something, anything, to ground him in reality. But the truth had already shaken everything he knew. It was no longer about the business, the threats, or even the people trying to tear us apart. It was about trust. And right now, David wasn't sure if he could trust me. He wasn't sure if he could trust any of this. But I couldn't back down. "I'm not asking you to understand right now," I said softly. "But please trust me. Please trust that I'm here for you, that I want to change things." David stood frozen, his hand gripping the desk harder now, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "I don't know how to process this," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "How do I know what's real anymore? How do I know you're not just part of some plan to manipulate me?" I'm not here to manipulate you, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I'm here because I love you, David, and I'm here to save you. David didn't say anything else. He just stood there, lost in his thoughts. I wasn't sure what would happen next, whether he would believe me or whether I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But I had to say it. I had to tell him the truth. Now all I could do was wait. The days that followed were a whirlwind. David hadn't said much since I told him the truth about where I came from, about my time travel, the accident, and everything that had led me here. His silence had been unbearable, but I knew that he was processing it all, trying to make sense of the impossible. I had been patient. I had waited, given him the space he needed, and tried to make myself as open and honest as possible. But nothing in this world or the next had prepared me for the moment when David would come to me, with a look in his eyes that told me everything had changed. It happened in the library of his childhood home, a place where we had spent so many hours together, often in silence, sometimes just reading or working. I could still feel the weight of the moment when David walked in, a folder in his hand, his face stern but not angry. He wasn't looking at me with disbelief anymore. That was a good sign. He stopped in front of me, setting the folder down on the table between us. His hands lingered on the edge of the table for a moment, as if he was still deciding whether to say something more. I found something, he said quietly. Something that... He hesitated. That proves you weren't lying. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. What do you mean? David didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, he opened the folder, revealing a series of papers. They were official-looking documents, photographs, records, some sort of investigation reports. He slid them across the table to me. My eyes scanned them quickly, and then my breath caught in my throat. It was a report about the accident, the one that had supposedly killed him. But it wasn't just about the crash. There were mentions of discrepancies, oddities in the police investigation, signs that the crash wasn't as accidental as it seemed. There were notes about people, business associates, people connected to David's company, that had been under suspicion for tampering with the brakes. How did you find this? I whispered, feeling a chill run through me. David leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. I've had my doubts for a while now. There were always too many questions, too many things that didn't add up. When you told me the truth, I thought maybe you were onto something. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could prove it. He paused, eyes meeting mine, and I did. My heart raced. He believed me. He actually believed me. I never wanted to trust anyone with this, David continued, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. But you're right, Lily. Someone wanted me dead, and that someone is still out there. I took in a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when David finally understood. The moment when the truth we had been dancing around for so long was finally out in the open. I don't know how to say this, he murmured, his eyes meeting mine again. But you were right, about everything. I stood up slowly, feeling my pulse race. So you believe me? You believe that I'm really from the future? David looked at me, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. Yes, I do. I don't know how or why, but I believe you, Lily. His voice cracked slightly as if the weight of everything finally hit him. And I'm sorry I didn't trust you sooner. I was afraid of what it all meant. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. This wasn't just about believing the truth anymore. It was about the way David's eyes softened when he spoke to me now, about the way his hand reached out and brushed against mine, tentatively at first, but then with more certainty. I understand, I said softly. I wasn't sure how to tell you. I wasn't sure if I should, but you had to know. You deserved to know the truth. David didn't say anything, but instead, he pulled me closer, his hand finding mine and holding it tightly as though he was afraid I might vanish. There was a long silence between us, a silence filled with all the unspoken emotions we had been ignoring for so long. And then, slowly, carefully, David whispered, Lily, I don't know what the future holds, but I think I'm falling for you. Not because of the contract, not because of some duty or obligation, but because of who you are. And I think you're falling for me too. My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that I couldn't, that this couldn't be real because of the future I was so determined to change. But the words caught in my throat. The truth was, I had fallen for him long before I even realized it. It wasn't just about saving him, it was about us, about the connection we shared, the warmth I never expected to find. I admitted softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm falling for you too, David, in ways I never thought possible. He closed the distance between us, his lips brushing gently against mine. It wasn't hurried or desperate. It was slow and tender, an acknowledgement of everything that had been left unsaid. When he pulled back, there was a smile on his face, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. I'm glad you're here, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I'd do without you. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that everything would be okay. That maybe, just maybe, I had found something worth fighting for. Not just a contract, not just a mission to save him, but something far deeper. Something that existed beyond time, beyond the contract. It was us. And that was enough. The day had arrived. It felt as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. The air was thick with tension, and every step I took seemed to echo louder than the last. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling slightly as I walked beside David through the crowded halls of his company building. We had done everything we could to prepare for today, but I knew we couldn't afford any mistakes. Not when it came to stopping the accident that had taken David's life in my original timeline. David had never been more on edge than he was now. I could see it in his eyes, the guarded look, the tightness in his jaw. He had no idea who could be behind the sabotage, no idea who he could trust anymore. And the worst part was, he didn't even realize it was happening again. Not yet, but I did. I could feel it in the air, the way everything seemed to be set up for disaster. Lily, David said, his voice low, his gaze flickering nervously to the clock on the wall. Are you sure you want to stay here today? I don't want you to be caught in the middle of whatever's about to happen. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I have to be here, David. I can't let you face this alone. He met my gaze, his eyes full of concern, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. We were in this together now, and I would see it through. We both would. David had been warned by the report we uncovered, by the whispers of betrayal that had followed him for so long, but it wasn't enough. There were too many people in his life he couldn't trust, too many layers of deception to unravel. The meeting began, but I could barely focus on the presentation in front of us. My eyes were constantly darting around the room, scanning for any hint of the saboteur, any sign that someone was about to make a move. And then it happened. I saw him. There, sitting across from us, was someone David had once called a friend. A man who had been in his circle for years. A man David had trusted with his life. His name was Simon Blackwood. He was a senior executive, someone who had always seemed friendly and approachable. But as my gaze met his for a split second, something inside me twisted. There was a glint in his eyes, something cold, something calculating. He was watching David closely, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. And in that moment, I knew. I knew Simon was the one, the saboteur, the man who had orchestrated the accident in my original timeline, the man who had put David's life in jeopardy without a second thought. He had always been there, hiding in plain sight, hiding behind the mask of a loyal business partner. But today, he would be exposed. I couldn't waste any more time. The tension in the room was suffocating. David was too focused on the meeting to notice anything, but I had to act quickly. I stood up, my heart racing in my chest as I approached Simon. I could feel David's eyes on me, confused, but I didn't have time to explain. Simon, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. We need to talk. Simon's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm demeanor slipping just enough to show a flicker of surprise. He quickly regained control, flashing me a forced smile. Of course, Lily. What's this about? About the accident, I said, my words deliberate and sharp. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? For a moment, Simon didn't say anything. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, until he leaned back in his chair, a smirk curling on his lips. You're playing a dangerous game, Lily, he said, his voice low and smooth. Do you really think David would believe you over me? I don't need him to believe me, I replied, my voice unwavering, because I have proof, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. Before Simon could respond, security flooded into the room, led by one of David's most trusted guards. They had been waiting for my signal, ready to act at a moment's notice. "Simon Blackwood," the guard said, stepping forward with authority. "You're under arrest for the attempted murder of David Torres." For a moment, Simon's face twisted with rage, his eyes flashing dangerously. But it was too late. The game was over. As he was led away by the guards, David stood frozen in his chair, his expression unreadable. I turned to him, my heart racing, hoping, praying that he understood why I'd done it. "Lily," David's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you know?" I walked over to him slowly, my hands shaking as I reached for his. "I didn't just come from the future to save you, David. I came to make sure you had a chance to live, to make sure I could give you the future you deserve." David's eyes softened, his fingers gently wrapping around mine. "You've already done that. You've given me a chance to change everything." We stood there, holding hands, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. The saboteur had been caught, the accident had been avoided, and the future for once was ours to shape. But as I looked into David's eyes, I knew there was still one more thing left to do, one more truth to confront, and we would face it together. The day had been saved. Simon Blackwood was in custody, and the accident that had once haunted my every step no longer loomed over us. It was over, at least in this timeline. But even as I stood there, watching the chaos unfold around us, a nagging doubt twisted at my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that time, in all its fickle, unpredictable nature, might still have its own plans. What if everything I'd done, the choices I'd made, the paths I'd walked, didn't matter in the grand scheme of things? What if the universe was just waiting to reset itself, as if none of this had ever happened? I looked at David, his face a mix of relief and disbelief, still processing everything that had transpired. His eyes locked onto mine, soft and searching, as if trying to read the thoughts I hadn't voiced. "Lily?" His voice was tentative, like he knew something was troubling me. "You're not saying anything. Are you okay?" I nodded quickly, trying to push the fear down, but it clung to me like a shadow. "I'm fine. Just a little tired, I guess." David didn't buy it. He took a step closer, his expression softening as he reached out to touch my arm. "Lily, I need you to be honest with me. I know something's wrong. You've been acting strange for days now." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. How could I explain the terrifying thought that lingered in the back of my mind, that no matter what I did, time could still rewrite itself? That all of this, the love I felt for him, the life we were building, might be taken away without warning? I couldn't say it out loud. I wasn't sure I could bear it if I did. "I'm just afraid," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Afraid that time might reset again, that everything we've fought for might be undone, that all of this," I motioned between us, the life we were slowly creating together, "might not even be real." David's hand slid down my arm until his fingers found mine, his grip tight and warm. "Lily," he said softly, his voice full of conviction, "I don't care what time does. I don't care if everything changes or if everything is wiped away. I don't care about the timelines. What I care about is you. I care about us." His words were simple, but they held such weight that they nearly stole my breath. "I've been given a second chance," David continued, his gaze unwavering. "A second chance to love you, to be with you. And I'm asking you, Lily, no matter what happens, no matter what timeline we're in, will you choose me? Will you choose us? No matter what the future holds?" I felt the tears rise before I could stop them. They burned in my eyes, threatening to spill over. How could I say no to him? How could I deny the love that had blossomed between us, the bond that had grown stronger with every moment we spent together? Time might try to tear us apart. It might rewrite the world and twist the fates we tried to shape. But the love I had for him, this love, the one we'd built, was real. No timeline could change that. "I choose you, David," I whispered through the lump in my throat. "I choose you, no matter what." His lips curved into a soft smile, the kind that always made my heart flutter, the kind that made me believe in the impossible. He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had escaped, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'll choose you too," he said quietly, "forever." In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that no matter what time had in store for us, we had something that no timeline could take away. We had each other. And that was all we needed. David pulled me into his arms, holding me tight as if to anchor me to this reality, to this love. And I held him back just as fiercely, afraid that if I let go, if I let even the smallest piece of doubt creep in, time would slip away like sand through my fingers. We stood there, tangled in each other's arms, the world around us fading away. No longer worried about what the future might bring, I focused only on the present, the here and now. Because with David, the only timeline that mattered was the one we were creating together. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the room as David stood by the window, his back to me. He had a look of contemplation on his face, something I had seen in him before, but this time it felt different. There was a weight to his silence, a finality that lingered in the air between us. I had never seen him so pensive, so unsure. He turned slowly, the weight of his thoughts heavy in his eyes. In his hand, he held the old contract, the one that had brought us together in the first place, the one that had dictated every moment of our lives for so long, the same contract that had kept us bound by obligation rather than choice. The paper was worn, edges fraying, the ink faded in places, a symbol of the promises we had made but never truly kept. David looked at it for a long moment, his jaw clenched before his eyes lifted to meet mine. "I don't need this anymore," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "We don't need it anymore." My heart raced in my chest, a knot forming in my throat. "David, what are you saying?" He took a deep breath, stepping closer to me, his gaze steady. This contract, this was never supposed to be about love. It was about duty, about expectations. But the truth is, Lily, he paused, his hand trembling slightly as he tore the paper down the middle, the sound of it echoing through the room. I don't want any part of that anymore. The pieces of the contract fluttered to the floor, a symbol of everything we had been bound by, everything that had held us back. And yet, as the remnants of that old life lay scattered between us, something in my chest began to bloom, a hope, a future I hadn't dared to imagine. David took another step toward me, his eyes now filled with something softer, something deeper. "I want you, Lily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not because of some contract, not because of a promise made by someone else. I want you because I love you. And I'm asking you here and now with no strings attached, will you marry me? For love, for us. Not because we have to, but because we choose to." My breath caught in my throat. The world seemed to pause, suspended in that single moment as the weight of his words sank in. The air felt thick with the significance of what he was offering: freedom, choice, and a love that had finally blossomed outside the constraints of a contract. Tears welled in my eyes as I reached for him, my fingers trembling as I touched his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of his heartbeat beneath my palm. "David," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. I've always wanted to. But not because we were forced into it. Because I love you too." A tear slipped down his cheek as he cupped my face in his hands, pulling me into a kiss that felt like the beginning of something new, a beginning of love, of freedom, of a future we had chosen together. When we finally pulled apart, he smiled at me, his eyes filled with hope. "No more contracts, Lily, just us from now on." And in that moment, I knew with every fiber of my being that we had finally broken free. We had torn down the walls that had kept us apart, and now we were free to love, free to choose, free to be who we were meant to be. David's hand slid into mine, his grip firm and warm, as we stepped into the future together. No more contracts, just love. And that was enough. The sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting a gentle glow on our new home. The space felt different, lighter, brighter, as if it were a reflection of the lives we were now beginning to build together. It wasn't the grandest house, but it was ours. No contracts, no obligations, just us. I stood in the living room, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee, the aroma filling the air. David was in the kitchen, unpacking the last few boxes, his movements easy and relaxed, his smile genuine. It felt surreal. After everything we'd been through, after all the twists and turns, we had finally reached this moment of peace. I glanced at the calendar on the wall where the numbers had changed, marking the days since the accident that had nearly torn us apart. 101 days. 101 days since I had come back to this time, to this moment, to David. He was here, alive. He was mine, and I was his. I couldn't help but smile at the thought. It was almost too much to comprehend. The past had been full of uncertainty and pain, but now there was only hope. The weight that had hung over us, pulling at our hearts, had finally lifted. We were free. David walked over to me, his brow furrowing playfully as he leaned down to kiss the top of my head. "You're thinking too much again," he teased, his voice warm with affection. "Come on, let's finish this. We have a whole new life ahead of us." I laughed softly, feeling the ease of his presence wash over me. "I know, I'm just happy. For the first time in so long, I finally feel at peace." He cupped my face gently, his expression softening. "We're going to make this work, Lily, together. I promise you, no matter what comes our way, we'll face it as one." I nodded, my heart swelling with love. "I know we will, David. I believe in us." The future that had once seemed uncertain now felt full of possibilities, endless and beautiful. Together, we could face whatever challenges came our way. Together, we had a chance to create something real, something lasting, something built on love rather than obligation. As we stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by boxes and the quiet hum of a new beginning, I realized just how far we had come. From strangers bound by a contract to two people who had found love in the most unexpected of places. I looked at David, my heart racing with affection. "We're finally free," I whispered, the words full of awe. He smiled, pulling me into his arms. "Yes, and this is just the beginning, Lily." The calendar might have said 101 days, but for us, it was the start of a new chapter. A chapter where we had the freedom to choose, to love, and to live without the weight of the past dragging us down. A chapter where we had everything we needed, each other. And for the first time, I knew that the rest of our lives would be ours to write. Together.